All right, we're back for our second session with Mayor Constantine from Morgan Hill. Mayor, thanks again for being with us. We appreciate you joining us. As we continue our questions, I do have a question about priorities. What are your priorities for Morgan Hill over the next 1 to 3 years?
Well, it's hard to think about, 3 years out from now, what that's going to look like. Currently, our priorities have always been to maintain our services and expand our services, but infrastructure is one thing. Our partnership with the wastewater treatment with Gilroy and Morgan Hill, we were looking at expanding that. With the downturn in the economy, those projects, whether it be our streets or expanding the wastewater treatment plant, they're going to be put on hold. So we're just really starting to feel on what's going to happen with our budget. We're going through our budget process right now, our normal budget process, but as you know, this is not a normal budget time. So it's going to be hard to think about what we're going to be doing 3 years out. The immediate future is going to be how we deal with this crisis, how we minimize the damage to our businesses and to our residents to make sure that we can return to what we used to think as normal. But just like when we were going through the drought, there are habits that we're going to do. Maybe these meetings that we're doing right now, we're going to have more Zoom meetings maybe than having to travel or go to different locations. Maybe that's going to become more prevalent, because I can remember when we were in the drought, there were habits that I'm continuing to do today just because it became a habit. So I imagine that as we go through time, there are going to be things that we have established today because of the COVID crisis that we're going to be continuing. Hopefully, we're going to be getting through this a little bit faster, but as we discussed in the previous section, this is going to be more of a dimmer switch, as you mentioned. We're going to be coming through this slowly, and so we're going to still have the same priorities: infrastructure, safety of our residents, making sure that our businesses can thrive and grow in our town, but we're also going to have the specter of the COVID-19 pandemic issue that's going to be a shadow in everything we do going forward.
Yeah, and I think as we look through that lens, I think every organization, every city now does have to sort of reevaluate what their goals were and how that all is going to change. Even with our own organization, we're having to relook at all of that, and changes just have to be made. We have to find a way of working through what we're dealing with, and then moving forward, how do we change habits, change our own habits, and for that matter, as you described, during this time, people will be getting into buying habits, and many of them were purchasing online. It'll be our job at some point to convince them to come back and begin purchasing from our local establishments. So that's going to be the challenge that we face, I think, in both communities, but we're just going to have to try to find a way to make that happen.
And I mentioned that we're going to be working as a team. I mean, that's going to be key to getting through this crisis and any future crisis, is how we work together, not just as our Morgan Hill residents and Morgan Hill businesses, but countywide, how we all work together with South County. I mean, it's almost like when we were coming out of the recession, and one of the things that I pushed was to tell people, buy local, support your local businesses, because not only are you helping our local businesses thrive, but you're also helping keep tax dollars here in our city, because those are the things that we're going to desperately need. So those are some of the things, those lessons that we learned from past issues, recessions, and economic downturns. We're going to have to carry those over into how we're going to be working forward. And you may hear my daughter in the background laughing, so I apologize for that, but that's life here at home. That's
exactly right. We refer to that as your coworkers.
There you go. There you go.
Well, as you mentioned future crises, one of the questions I have for you is what are your thoughts as to how South County residents, both residents and businesses, can prepare for a future crisis, whether that be a pandemic, a natural disaster, or something like that?
Right. Well, the preparation, as you can imagine, are quite different for both natural disasters and pandemics. Pandemics are good and bad, and let me explain what I mean by good and bad. Now, the bad is obviously that we're in one right now, and the ramifications of what's happening with a pandemic. Our businesses are shut down. We're doing something in this country that I've never seen happen, and I would imagine a vast majority of our population has never seen our economic engine as strong as it is being shut down. But we're still able to purchase food. We're still able to receive services. So that's the good part about it. We can still get our food. We don't have to worry about having a supply in our home. Whereas a natural disaster, we don't get a warning. Like an earthquake or a flood or something, we don't get a warning. So we have to be prepared all the time. And we have to be able to be resilient. As a former firefighter, I know that there are not enough firefighters, there are not enough police officers in the event of a natural disaster. So citizens have to be prepared to be on their own for at least 3 days. I would say a minimum of 3 days. So you have to have the water, you have to have the non-perishable food items in your home. And of course, like everybody else, I don't really remember about that until we have an earthquake. And we recently had an earthquake just outside of Anderson Dam. So that kind of reminded me to check the pantry and make sure we have the water, make sure we have those things. So we just have to be vigilant. But, you know, as far as in the pandemic, we also have to remember not to panic. You know, we all seen in the stores the toilet paper being gone, the rice. I mean, all those things that are not in shortage, but they're in shortage because people are panic buying them, and stores didn't know that they needed to order so many more rolls of toilet paper than they're doing now. So people just have to be cognizant of that to make sure that they don't do things they don't really need to do, because those things are not in shortage right now. So they're a little bit different, but we just have to maintain our balance, so to speak, and just to make sure that we are prepared. It's harder to prepare for a natural disaster, but we just have to, again, remain vigilant. We are an earthquake country, and even though we haven't had an earthquake for a long time, doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Right. No, very good point. And it's better to be prepared as much as you can for a situation like that.
Exactly.
Mayor, let me ask you: are you guys in Morgantown? Are you preparing a sort of a return to work plan for your local businesses?
Well, as I mentioned in the earlier segment, we have business resilient roundtables that we've been holding, and again, they focus around different industries such as retail, manufacturing, hospitality, and restaurants. So we are learning. Not only are we not edifying our businesses with the information, but we're also learning from the businesses too, because we're hearing back from industry leaders on what they need, what they're seeing that they're going to need in the future. Things like for restaurants, having areas for open seating, expanded seating. They may need to expand in areas that they haven't been allowed to by ordinance in the city, that we're going to have to allow them to do that, like with parklets or sidewalk seating, just so they can accommodate more customers in that larger area. Because as I said before, social distancing is not something that's going to be turned off right away. It's going to continue. We're going to need to maintain that for quite some time. So issues like that, companies are going to need to stay open longer, because they're not going to be able to allow as many people to come through their doors because of social distancing. So things like, operating hours, we're going to have to look at. There's going to be a myriad of things that we can think of now, but that may come up in the future that we're going to have to implement. So those are the things that we're going to have to, but they're coming up. Like I said, with the roundtables that we're holding, our economic development team has really been doing an outstanding job reaching out, not only to, as I said, to educate our businesses, but also to get information back so that we can actually disseminate it to everybody. And we'd love to invite everyone in Gilroy to also attend those meetings as well.
Well, thank you for that invite. I know that we're going to have to certainly apply at least some minimal protocols for businesses across the board in order to create a sense of security and a peace of mind for customers as they return to restaurants and other businesses.
Right.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That ends our second session here. We're going to be back with our final session here in just a few seconds.